Arizona Territory, 1879. The sun was already high when Adeline Sutter stepped onto the cracked red dirt of the main street in Florence, skirts dusty, eyes set firm on the far side of town. She stood beside the telegraph office, a worn satchel over one shoulder and a baby blue bonnet tied tight beneath her chin. Her shoes were scuffed, and her voice was low but clear when she asked the man on the bay horse, "Excuse me, you know anyone headed west across town? I need a ride." The cowboy looked down from the saddle, one hand resting easy on the horn. His face was sun-browned, eyes the color of smoke, and his jaw carried a dark line of stubble. His name was Montgomery Oakes, and he had not planned to stop. But something about her, the way she stood straight even though her dress clung to her like it had been washed too many times, the grit in her voice made him rein in his horse. "Where to on the west side?" he asked. Adeline hesitated. "Just past the Cottonwood Grove. My sister used to live there. I reckon her boy's still out that way." Montgomery studied her for a breath, then swung down from the saddle. "You got a name, Adeline Sutter," he nodded. "Montgomery Oakes. Most folks call me Monty. I'll take you wherever you want." She blinked. "Just need a ride across town." Monty gave a slow smile, the kind that did not reach his eyes but tried to. "I'll take you wherever you want forever." Adeline's mouth parted like she was about to protest, but no words came. She looked away, unsure how to answer that kind of kindness. Monty did not press. He helped her up onto the horse, hands careful not to linger. Then he mounted behind her, his arms steady around the reins. They rode in silence, dust curling behind them. Monty had not meant to say that. The words had come out easy, too easy for a man who barely spoke to strangers. But something inside him, something old and quiet, had stirred when he saw her. They passed the general store, the livery, the old chapel with its sagging roof. Florence was not much more than a breath of buildings in the desert, but to Adeline it was everything she had left behind and everything she had nowhere else to go. "Your sister still living?" Monty asked after a while. Adeline shook her head. "She died last spring. Fever took her fast. Her boy Benjamin, he's only 5. He got left with the old neighbor couple. I sent word I was coming to get him." Monty nodded. "That's a long ride alone." Adeline stared ahead. "I did not have a choice." They reached the grove not long after. The cottonwoods whispered in the breeze, tall and still green despite the heat. A small house sat crooked on a patch of dry land, smoke curling from its chimney. Monty helped her down. She looked at the door, then at him. "I do not know if the boy even remembers me," she said. "You are here," Monty said simply. "That counts." Adeline crossed slowly to the porch. Before she could knock, the door opened. An older woman with gray curls and a worn apron stood there, holding the hand of a small boy with wide brown eyes. Adeline dropped to her knees. "Benji." The boy hesitated, then ran to her. She caught him in her arms so tight he squealed, her bonnet falling back as she pressed her face to his hair. He clung to her, both arms locked around her neck. The older woman stepped out. "He has not stopped asking for you. He is yours if you are ready." Adeline nodded, tears slipping down her cheeks. "I am." Monty watched from a few steps away, arms crossed. He had seen a lot of hard things in this life. Men die, women break, children starve. But this, a mother kneeling in the dust with her boy, it was the kind of good you carried with you. They stayed the night in the neighbor's extra room. Monty slept outside on a roll under the stars. He did not ask what Adeline planned to do next. He just waited. In the morning, she stepped onto the porch, Benji's small hand in hers. She looked at Monty where he was saddling his horse. "I could use a ride," she said softly. "Into town, and maybe further." Monty looked up. "You sure?" "I do not know where we are going," she said. But I know I do not want to go alone. He stepped toward her, took Benji's hand first, then hers. You will not. The three of them rode out together, slow at first, the sun just breaking over the hills. Adeline sat behind Monty, arms around her boy, her cheek resting against his back. She did not speak. She did not have to. Montgomery Oakes had meant what he said. He would take her wherever she wanted, for as long as she wanted him to. And right now, that meant everything. They followed the Gila River west, where the water cut slow and silver through the dry veins of the land. Monty led the mare along a narrow trail threaded between ironwood and mesquite. The boy rode in front of Adeline, nestled safe between her arms, his small fingers curled around the saddle horn. She kept her gaze ahead, but her body leaned with the sway of the horse, steady as if she'd ridden this way her whole life. Monty didn't speak much, but he kept glancing back. Not with worry, more with a quiet awareness, like he was learning the shape of something he hadn't known he needed. At midday, they stopped beneath a bluff where the rocks threw shade wide enough for all three. Monty unpacked dried venison and cornbread from his saddlebag, handing them out without word. Adeline accepted hers with a nod, tearing a piece in two and offering the larger half to Benji. The boy ate in silence, crumbs catching on the corners of his mouth. When he finished, he wandered to the edge of the rocks, crouching to poke at a lizard with a twig. Monty watched him a moment, then turned back to Adeline. You ever been west of here before? She shook her head. Not more'n a day's ride out of Florence. My sister came this way when she married. I stayed behind, thought I'd never leave. What changed? Adeline glanced toward her son. He needed me, and Florence didn't hold anything worth staying for. Monty waited. She didn't offer more, so he didn't ask. He stretched his legs out, resting his back against the rock wall. You headed anywhere in particular? She said after a while. I've got cattle work waiting near the Agua Fria. Old friend runs a spread out there. Said he could use another pair of hands. Is that what you want? Monty lifted his hat and ran a hand through his hair before settling it back. It's honest, doesn't ask too much of a man. I reckon it's better than most. She folded her hands in her lap. I can cook, so. I've mended tack before, even kept a garden going through 2 dry seasons. He looked at her, eyes steady. You thinking of staying on there? I'm thinking Benji needs a place with more than a borrowed bed. And I need to know what it feels like to wake up somewhere that's mine. Monty didn't answer right away. The wind stirred a few dry leaves between them. You'd be welcome, he said finally. Both of you. She didn't smile, but something in her shoulders eased just a little. That evening, they camped by a bend in the river where the banks sloped gentle and the cottonwoods grew close. Monty built a fire while Adeline laid a blanket for Benji and tucked him beneath it. He fell asleep quick, worn out from the ride and the sun. Monty stirred beans in a tin over the flame. Adeline sat across from him, legs drawn beneath her, hair down now, loose around her shoulders. You ever think about settling? She asked. I did once. What happened? She married someone else. Adeline studied him across the firelight. You still carrying that? Monty shrugged. Not so much anymore, just leaves a mark is all, she nodded. Yeah, I know how that feels. They didn't speak again for a long while. The fire cracked low. Somewhere out in the dark, a night bird called, long and lonesome. Then Monty said, You were brave, coming after him like you did. Adeline's voice was quiet. I was scared every step, still brave. She looked at him then, not through him, not past him, but directly, like she could see all the parts he didn't speak of. You meant what you said? She asked. About taking me wherever I want. His gaze didn't waver. I did. I'm not easy company. I'm not looking for easy. She didn't answer, not with words, but she pulled her shawl tighter, then shifted closer to the fire until the space between them was only warmth. Monty watched her face, the way the light caught the curve of her cheek. He didn't reach for her. He didn't need to. She was already leaning his way. The morning broke pale and quiet. Scrub jays chattered from the brush as Monty saddled the mare. Adeline folded the blanket with the same care she used brushing a child's hair, corners aligned, motions sure. Benji wandered the riverbank, scooping water into a tin cup and pouring it over smooth stones. Monty glanced toward the boy. He always that still in the mornings. Adeline tied her shawl tighter. No, he's thinking. He gets quiet when he's thinking. Monty wiped his hands on his trousers and stepped to where she stood. We'll reach the ranch by dusk if the trail holds. You'll meet the folks there, Cal and me. They were good to me when I was younger. Adeline's brow lifted. You grew up near there, not far. My pa ran cattle out past Black Canyon. Ma died birthing my sister. She didn't last the year either. After that, it was just him and me. He drank more than he worked, so I left as soon as I could ride far enough not to come back. She studied him like someone measuring distance, weighing the shape of a man's past against what she'd seen of him now. You think they'll take to us? They'll take to you, Monty said. Me's got a soft spot for children. Cal says it's on account of losing 3 of their own before the war. She'll feed him before she asks your name. Adeline looked toward her son. He don't warm easy. Not since, she stopped herself, jaw tightening. He don't have to, Monty said. Not until he's ready. Adeline looked down at her hands. Hard to know what ready even means anymore. Monty's voice stayed low. Means you get up and keep going, even when you'd rather not. They rode through the day, the land rising into rocky humps where jackrabbits darted and buzzards drifted in wide circles overhead. The air smelled of dust and creosote, and by mid-afternoon, Benji had fallen asleep against Adeline's chest. Monty slowed the mare to a walk. He sleep much on the trail? No, only when he feels safe. Monty didn't answer. He just kept the pace steady, one hand loose on the reins. By the time the sun dipped behind the last ridge, the land had flattened into a span of grass and low pine. A split-rail fence ran along a narrow pasture where 2 horses grazed. Beyond that stood a house of river rock and clapboard, porch sagging just enough to show age but cared for enough to still feel strong. A woman came out from the side of the house, wiping her hands on an apron. Her hair was pinned back, streaked with gray, and her face held no softness at first glance, just the kind of sharpness that came from surviving too many years with too little rest. Monty lifted his hand. Me. She squinted into the dusk. You're late. I brought company. Me crossed the yard, boots kicking up pale dust. Her gaze landed on Adeline, then dropped to Benji, now awake but quiet in his mother's arms. Me didn't ask questions. She reached out and touched the boy's shoulder. You hungry, little one? Benji nodded without a word. Come on then, got stew on the stove. Adeline hesitated. Monty stepped down and offered his hand. You're here now. She slid off the horse, Benji still in her arms, and nodded once to me. Thank you. Me turned back toward the house. You'll sleep in the room near the kitchen. Supper's hot. Wash first. Inside, the house smelled of wood smoke and thyme. Cal was already seated at the table, thick hands folded over a tin mug. His hair had gone white, but his shoulders were still broad beneath his worn shirt. He offered a nod to Adeline and Benji, then turned to Monty. Didn't expect you back this soon. Monty shrugged. Wasn't planning on it. Cal looked from him to Adeline. Guess plans change. Monty didn't answer. Later, after Benji had fallen asleep beneath a quilt that smelled faintly of lavender, Adeline stepped out onto the porch where Monty leaned against the post, watching the stars rise. He didn't cry tonight, she said. Monty didn't look over. That's something. She stepped beside him, arms folded against the cooling air. "You still planning to work cattle if Cal'll have me? And if he doesn't," Monty turned to her at last, "then I'll find another way to stay." Adeline's voice was barely above a whisper. "I don't want to be just passing through." "You're not." The silence between them stretched, not heavy, just full. Monty reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a small, worn book. "Used to carry this when I was younger. Don't read it much anymore, but I held on to it." He handed it to her. Inside, the pages were yellowed, the cover nearly rubbed blank. Her fingers traced the edge. "Why give it to me?" "Because you look like someone who might still believe in what's written down." She held the book against her chest. "I don't know what I believe yet." "That's all right," Monty said. "I'll believe enough for both of us till you figure it out." She didn't answer, but she didn't move away either. He reached for her hand, and this time she let him take it. Their fingers folded together, quiet and sure. And the stars above them burned steady, as if the land itself was holding its breath. The next weeks settled into rhythm. Monty rose before first light, feeding the stock and checking fence lines with Cal. Adeline split her time between the kitchen and the garden plot Me had let go fallow seasons ago. She brought it back slow, coaxing rows of beans and squash from the stubborn earth with her hands in the dirt and Benji clinging quiet to her side. The boy spoke little but watched everything, eyes following Monty when he rode out, lingering on Adeline's face when she worked in the shade. One afternoon, the sun sitting high and sharp, Monty rode back from the west pasture with his shirt clinging to his back and a long scrape along his forearm where a barbed wire post had given way. He stepped down in the yard, dust clinging to his boots, just as Adeline came from the side of the house with a metal pail full of water. "You're bleeding," she said, setting the pail down. Monty glanced at his arm, unconcerned. "Fence wire caught me." "It'll close." "That's not how infections think." She reached for him without waiting, guiding him toward the porch with firm fingers on his wrist. "Sit." He obeyed, the wooden step warm beneath him. She dipped a rag into the water and began to clean the cut. Her touch was sure, not soft, but it steadied something in him all the same. "You ever think about leaving the trail behind for good?" she asked, wringing the rag out with one hand. He watched her hands. "Sometimes. Don't know what I'd be without it." "You'd be someone who made it home before supper. Someone a boy could look to and know he'd be there come morning." Monty didn't answer right away. He looked out across the yard, where Benji crouched beneath the apricot tree, poking a stick into a knot of ants. "I never had someone waiting," he said. "You do now," she replied, voice quiet. He looked up then, and her eyes held steady on his. He reached for her hand, the one still damp from the rag. She let him take it. That night after supper, Cal offered Monty a side of the barn to fix up. "Could use a tack room. You want to stay, you'll need space." Monty had nodded, then glanced at Adeline, his answer already decided. The next days were spent hammering planks and clearing out rusted tools. Monty worked long into the evenings and Benji started following him, shadow-like. He didn't speak, just handed nails or held boards straight when asked. Monty didn't press him, but he began saving the easier tasks for the boy's small hands. One morning, Benji placed a small horseshoe beside Monty's bedroll where he'd been sleeping in the barn. It was nicked and bent, one side worn smooth. Monty picked it up carefully. "That yours?" Benji nodded. Monty looked him in the eye. "I'll carry it." The boy's smile was brief, but it stayed with Monty the rest of the day. Later, in the cool hush before supper, Monty found Adeline beside the well, turning the handle in slow, rhythmic pulls. Her sleeves were rolled and her hair had slipped from its pins, strands curling against her neck. "I've been thinking," he said. She didn't stop cranking. "That sounds dangerous," he smiled, a real one this time. "You've set roots here. Me says the garden's doing better than it has in years." She let go of the handle, the bucket settling with a splash. It isn't just me. Things grow when they're tended. He stepped closer. I want to build something more than a tack room. She tilted her head. What kind of something? A life. With you, with him. Adeline didn't answer right away. She reached down and dipped her hand into the water, then stood and faced him. You sure you're not just grateful? Monty shook his head. I've been grateful before. This is different. She looked long at him, then stepped into the small space between them. You mean it? I've never meant anything more. She touched his cheek, rough with sun and trail, and leaned in until their foreheads met. Then don't ask again, she whispered. Just stay. He wrapped his arms around her, and the world narrowed to the scent of her skin and the steady rhythm of her breath. Behind them, the sky stretched wide and gold, the air cooling as the land prepared for night. Inside the house, Mee stirred a pot. Cal lit the lamp. And under the apricot tree, Benji watched the two figures by the well, then turned back to the ants, content. The wind shifted in early September. It came in cooler from the north, brushing across the fields with a whisper that stirred the tops of the late corn and set the chickens pacing near the coop. Monty was splitting cedar near the barn when Adeline stepped outside with a small basket tucked into the crook of her arm. She'd taken to drying sage and wild mint, lining the windowsills with small tied bundles that filled the house with a sharp, clean scent. She crossed the yard slow, her steps careful, and stopped just behind him. Mee says we'll have frost soon. She's thinking of moving the hens into the shed. Monty drove the wedge in deeper, the log cracking with a soft pop. That shed needs a new latch. I'll fix it before sundown. She adjusted the basket. Benji's been asking about school. He looked up. There's a schoolhouse, small one east of the ridge. Cal says it's been shuttered since spring, but the teacher's still in town. I thought we might ride over, see if she's willing to take him on. Monty wiped his hands on his trousers. You want me to come? Adeline looked toward the fields where a hawk circled high above the corn. I think he does. They rode out after the midday meal. Benji sat in front of Monty this time, his small boots bouncing lightly against the saddle's sides. The trail curved around low hills, and cottonwood leaves had begun to yellow along the creek beds. When they reached the town's edge, the schoolhouse stood quiet, sunlight striping the dust-covered windows. The teacher was a woman near 60, with a limp and a voice like gravel. She welcomed Benji with a nod and asked him to read from a tattered primer. He hesitated at first, then pointed to the letters, one by one, his voice barely above a whisper. She listened, then turned to Adeline. He's smart. Just needs steady hours and patience. You bring him each week, I'll do the rest. Adeline nodded, her hand resting lightly on Benji's shoulder. We will. That night, the house smelled of onion soup and baked apples. After supper, Monty lingered on the porch while Adeline tucked Benji into the cot near the fire. When she stepped outside, she found him sitting on the steps, whittling a bit of pine. I've been thinking, she said. He looked up. I want to marry you. Monty blinked once, then smiled, not wide, not showy, but quiet and warm, like something long settled in his chest had just found its shape. Tomorrow, he asked. She laughed, a soft, breathy sound. Sunday. Mee says the preacher from Camp Verde comes through then. Monty set the carving aside. I'll be there. They were married under the cottonwood by the fence line, with Cal holding Benji steady on his hip and Mee pressing a handkerchief to her cheek like she'd never expected to see such a day. The preacher said his words, brief and plain, then stepped back. Monty took Adeline's hands, rough fingers against hers, and kissed her slow and sure in front of everyone. Later, they danced in the dust while Cal played fiddle on the porch. The chickens clucked in confusion, and Mee brought out a jar of preserved peaches she'd been saving since the war ended. Benji fell asleep curled in a quilt near the steps, his thumb tucked beneath his chin. That night, Monty carried Adeline across the threshold of the main house, where Me had made up the front bedroom fresh with linens and lavender-scented soap. He set her down gently, then closed the door behind them. "You nervous?" she asked, her voice low. He shook his head. "No, just grateful." Adeline reached for his collar and pulled him to her. "Then come here, husband." They woke tangled together, the window cracked open to let in the scent of pine and morning bread. Monty brushed a strand of hair from her cheek and whispered her name like it was something holy. She smiled against his shoulder. "We made it, didn't we?" "We did." Years passed. The garden flourished, the hens multiplied, and Benji grew into a boy with long legs and a steady hand for numbers. He helped Monty build a new shed, then a chicken run, and later a second room off the house where he could keep books and maps. Adeline taught him how to cook and read the sky. Monty taught him to tie knots and saddle a horse proper. When the boy turned 10, they gave him his own colt, a dun-colored thing with quick eyes and a good gait. Monty never left again. He built fences, mended tools, and came home every night with dust on his boots and a smile already forming when he saw the lamplight in the window. Adeline kept the house, grew herbs for the townsfolk, and wrote letters for women who could not write their own. She sang sometimes when she thought no one was listening. Monty always heard, and every Sunday, no matter the weather, they walked hand in hand to the cottonwood where they'd wed. They lived long and well, not without hardship but with love tucked into every corner. And when they were old, they sat on the porch in the evenings, her shawl over both their shoulders, his hand still curled around hers like it had never let go, because it hadn't.